Welcome to episode 9, where we've got 2 brand new segments and a random reaction. Let's get started.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
For our episode beginning today, we've got a brand new segment called Exemplary Examples. This is just an opportunity for us to highlight somebody who's doing a great job. We see enough bad news, enough discouragement going on in today's world. It's important to remind ourselves that we're not alone. There are other people out there who share our values, who are speaking the truth, who are being brave and bold about what they say, and we want to remember those people. So we're going to start today with Harrison Butker. If you are unfamiliar with this story, Harrison Butker is a kicker for the Kansas City Chiefs. He gave a commencement speech at Benedictine College in Atchison, Kansas. He spoke about many issues that people consider controversial. For example, he condemned our president. He also condemned abortion and surrogacy. He makes it clear that he is against the gender ideology taught to children and DEI ideals. Here is one of my favorite quotes from his speech. "These are the sorts of things we are told in polite society to not bring up. You know, the difficult and unpleasant things. But if we are going to be men and women for this time in history, we need to stop pretending that the church of nice is a winning proposition. We must always speak and act in charity, but never mistake charity for cowardice." In his speech, he took a moment to address women, and herein lies the controversy. Let's take a listen.
I can tell you that my beautiful wife, Isabel, would be the first to say that her life truly started when she began living her vocation as a wife and as a mother. I'm on this stage today and able to be the man I am because I have a wife who leans into her vocation. I'm beyond blessed with the many talents God has given me, but it cannot be overstated that all of my success is made possible because a girl I met in band class back in middle school would convert to the faith, become my wife, and embrace one of the most important titles of all, homemaker. She's a primary educator to our children. She's the one who ensures I never let football or my business become a distraction from that of a husband and father. She is the person that knows me best at my core, and it is through our marriage that, Lord willing, we will both attain salvation. I say all of this to you because I have seen it firsthand, how much happier someone can be when they disregard the outside noise and move closer and closer to God's will in their life. Isabel's dream of having a career might not have come true, but if you asked her today if she has any regrets on her decision, she would laugh out loud without hesitation and say, heck no.
Apparently, people took offense to this section. They believe he was limiting women or moving back progress. Let's take a look at one article that describes this. So this is a CNN article entitled "Backlash Over NFL Player Harrison Butker's Commencement Speech Has Reached a New Level." In the article, it says, judging from the hundreds upon hundreds of critical comments on Butker's Instagram posts and about him on X and TikTok, his remarks did not sit well with many people. This wasn't a case of foot and mouth. It was a well-prepared speech, wrote columnist Sam McDowell in the Kansas City Star. Women listening in the audience, rather than being rewarded with a diploma on graduation day, were made to listen as he promoted the role of homemaker, not as an acceptable choice, but as their duty as a husband's servant. Another article describes the response of his teammates. This is an ABC News article. It says, Patrick Mahomes responds to teammate Harrison Butker's controversial graduation speech. There's certain things that he said that I don't necessarily agree with, but I understand the person that he is, and he is trying to do whatever he can to lead people in the right direction, Mahomes said of Butker, according to ESPN, and that might not be the same values as I have. So even though he disagrees, he still goes on to say, but at the same time, I'm going to judge him by the character that he shows every single day. That's a great person, and we'll continue to move along and try to help build each other up to make ourselves better every single day. So, good thing for Harrison Butker, he has some teammates who are willing to go to bat for him. They wouldn't agree with the sorts of things he said in his speech, but they would vouch for his character and, in general, be kind in their responses. So before I go on, I want to be clear that Harrison Butker did not only address women, he also addressed men, compelling men to prioritize their rightful role in society and emphasizing the value of a man in his own home. Butker did not offer a contrasting message to men and women, saying to one group to go live your dreams, but to the other to quietly submit and do nothing. Rather, he compelled all people, both men and women, to set aside any selfish desires and ambitions and to prioritize their rightful roles, including their roles in the home. But the real reason I bring up Harrison Butker as an example is not because of the contents of his original speech alone. Many people have made profound statements that upset their critics and have promoted a lifestyle of humility and submission to God. Many people have had critics exaggerate their statements, take their words out of context, and make them appear to be hateful or harsh when they did nothing of the sort. What distinguishes Harrison Butker from those many other people is that he did not apologize for his words, but rather defended them after facing backlash. So here is an excerpt of what he said. In my 7 years in the NFL, I've become familiar with the positive and negative comments, but the majority of them revolve around my performance on the field. But as to be expected, the more I've talked about what I value most, which is my Catholic faith, the more polarizing I have become. It's a decision I've consciously made and one I do not regret at all. So I hope that we can follow in his example. May we also have the courage to speak boldly for the truth, to be willing to face suffering and criticism, and in the midst of the turmoil to look to God and to those who have gone before us for our encouragement and hope. Up next, we're going to jump into a random reaction. For today's random reaction, we're going to look at a video posted on Twitter by Rod Dreyer. I think this video you'll just find sparks some good conversation and helps us really think about the type of society that we're living in today.
I hope I can say this respectfully, but after 10 years in Mexico, and then I come back to the United States, I am deeply concerned about what I see as a psychological discomfort that is so obvious in comparison to Mexico. People from the United States can be the best, kindest, most responsible people, but a large majority look like they're just losing it. The last couple of days I've risked it and I've asked people, when I said good afternoon to you or hello, why, if you don't mind me asking, did you just pull away, turn your back? One said, I just want to be left alone. That's fine. Thank you for answering my question. The one that I thought was most interesting was the Mexicana. When I asked her why she got defensive and kind of turned her back to me, she was really honest and sweet. She said, in Mexico, people, they see you in trouble, they help. Here in the United States, they see you in trouble, they try to find a reason to look away. She said, in Mexico, everyone can look different in one family, but here in the United States, everything's racialized. And the pressure, like here in Orange County, California, the pressure of always being alone, you just zone out. And I think we see a real issue here in the United States, that it's going to snap soon or it's going to get fixed. Because there's no way you can have this much pressure, this much solidarity, this much being alone and make it. And I feel really sorry for people, because there are people outside of the United States who people from the United States look down on, and they're living their best lives. They may eat only beans and rice, but they're happy. They may only eat noodles, but they're happy. And if you say hello to them, they will say hello. They will turn their whole body to you, and they will say, so good to see you. Have a great day. They'll even start talking to you. They'll want to get to know you. That wanting to get to know you after you say hi to somebody here in the United States, unheard of. Completely unheard of. Again, I love my country. But I'm sorry, I feel sorry for the sadness and the tension, the loneliness and the fear that I see in so many people.
I think there's so many things that we can talk about from this video that are really important. I think it definitely highlights the value of relationships, of community, of being able to talk and not being alone. And I think it really highlights the divisiveness of the current state of politics in America. And there's the divisions, of Republican, Democrat, conservative, liberal. And I think even with that, we have to remember the humanity of people, not just view people as a label or as a political identity. But then we also see these ideologies being taught. We've got gender ideologies, we've got DEI ideologies that are being taught to people. And some people are literally being taught to view social interactions through this lens of the oppressor and the oppressed. They're being taught to view social interactions just looking for what might be offensive or what might be triggering or what might be, bothersome. They might be looking at that towards themselves, kind of expecting other people to be at them, to be treating them like a victim, to be, hurting them. Or they might be looking the other way and be so fearful that they're going to offend someone or going to bother someone. I know we've talked in previous videos just about this issue in terms of racial relationships and racial tensions. I know myself personally, I've been in a foster care training. They had 9 pictures of people, and they told you to pick one in your mind and to describe that person in the picture so someone could identify who it was. And then after, a few people took their turn, they pointed out that nobody would mention the race of the person because there's just this fear of talking about it. There's this fear that you're going to say the wrong thing, that you're going to offend somebody, that someone's going to think you're not culturally sensitive or whatever. And so we just don't talk about it. And there's just become more and more and more of these topics, of these situations that we're just afraid to engage with. So when we see someone that's not the same as us or someone that we don't know or unfamiliar with, there's this fear, and we need to really overcome that fear to have compassion for others, to view other people as human, and to be willing to interact with other people, to just be friendly and be kind and, exemplify our values, our Christian values, our conservative values, is how we view people. So I think this really just highlights the importance of that it's deeper than just winning politics. It's deeper than just these political ideologies. This is just how we view human beings and how we treat each other and caring for the world and people who are in our communities. And we're actually going to talk a little bit more about the value of relationships in our next segment. So for our last segment, we have another new segment called Research Response. So we live in a society and culture that always wants to say, follow the science, but at the same time, they manipulate the science to kind of say whatever they want. So I think it's good for us to go to the original research ourselves whenever we can and dig into it. There is a lot of interesting research out there, and I think you guys would be interested in this particular story or this particular research paper. This is on the National Library of Medicine. It is called Marital Status and Survival in Patients with Cancer, and this was published in the Journal of Clinical Oncology. So if you're unfamiliar with oncology, that would be the branch that specifically deals with cancer. So first, the purpose of this study, they say to examine the impact of marital status on stage at diagnosis, use of definitive therapy, and cancer-specific mortality among each of the 10 leading causes of cancer-related death in the United States. Right, so they're looking to see, is there a link between marital status and death from cancer? The methods, we use the surveillance, epidemiology, and end results program to identify 1,260,898 patients diagnosed in 2004 through 2008 with lung, colorectal, breast, pancreatic, prostate, liver, intrahepatic, bile duct, non-Hodgkin lymphoma, head, neck, ovarian, or esophageal cancer. We use multivariable logistic and Cox regression to analyze 734,889 patients who had clinical and follow-up information available. So that was kind of a lot, but they listed all of the types of cancer that they were looking at. They listed where they got their data from. So in this case, they were using data that already existed. So they went to an already existing database to find information about the patients. Once they obtained their patient list, they then went through and found out the marital status of those patients and some other demographic information that kind of explained that more detail in a later part of the study. All right, their results. Married patients were less likely to present with metastatic disease, more likely to receive definitive therapy, and less likely to die as a result of their cancer after adjusting for demographics, stage, and treatment than unmarried patients. These associations remained significant when each individual cancer was analyzed. And just real quick there, that word significant, in order for a statistical analysis to have significance, that's really what they're saying to show that there is a discrepancy between the two groups. So if they said they were not significant, then that would mean that marriage did not really have any impact on whether or not the patients died. So when they're saying it's significant, they mean mathematically it's statistically significant, meaning that it's unlikely that the difference shown in the data could have happened by chance because of how far different the data was between the married and unmarried patients. It's reasonable to say that there is actually a correlation there, that this didn't just happen randomly. There is a connection between marriage and the likelihood of death from cancer. The benefit associated with marriage was greater in males and females for all outcome measures analyzed. For prostate, breast, colorectal, esophageal, and head and neck cancers, the survival benefit associated with marriage was larger than the published survival benefit of chemotherapy. All right, and one thing I wanted to go over was this word, metastatic. I had to look this one up, so I'm going to read the definition up here. That's the spread of cancer cells from the place where they first formed to another part of the body. Right, so when they said at the beginning, married patients were less likely to present with metastatic disease, right, they're saying it's less likely that the cancer would spread throughout their body. So very interesting results, right, to say that marriage is so significant that in some cases the survival benefit is actually more significant than the benefit of chemotherapy. Now, I'm certainly not a cancer expert, but just based on my knowledge, chemotherapy is definitely the treatment that you first associate when you hear about cancer. So hearing that something else, right, that's not a medical intervention, it's just whether or not you're married to someone, has such a significant impact, was surprising to me. In the conclusion, they say even after adjusting for well-known co-founders, so they're saying there are other things that you might say would be different, so they account for that in the data based on how they did their analysis. Unmarried patients are at a significantly higher risk of presentation with metastatic cancer, undertreatment, and death resulting from their cancer. This study highlights the potentially significant impact that social support can have on cancer detection, treatment, and survival. So what I wanted to show you, they have a lot of specifics about their study, but there's one table in particular where they compare the chemotherapy and marriage. So they have this table and it lists the different types of cancer. And they have the chemotherapy study where they got their information about the chemotherapy, the population evaluated, the type of chemotherapy, and they have an HR, so that's a hazard ratio, right? So they're comparing the chemotherapy group with a group that did not receive chemotherapy. So if this ratio were to be 1, that would be to say that there's no difference between the two groups, a 1-to-1 ratio, it matches up. But because the ratio is not equal to 1, that means there's a difference, right? The group who had chemotherapy was not as likely to die. So then they compare that with the hazard ratio for marriage. And you can see in some of these cases, like with prostate cancer, the hazard ratio for chemotherapy is 0.79, as opposed to for marriage is 0.74. So you can see that the hazard ratio for marriage is farther away from 1, meaning that there's a greater difference in the likelihood of death from marriage than there was from chemotherapy. And so that's true for a few of them. And even the ones where it's not true, it's still, not that far off. So I found that to be very interesting. And I think this just goes back into the segments we talked about earlier. Harrison Butker is just talking about the value of mothers and their role in the home, the value of father being in the home, like that relationship of your family. And the random reaction, we just talked about the value of just not being alone, of being able to talk to other people, of getting to know people. And then we see here in this study that this is literally life or death. People are spared from death because of relationships that they have. And they talk about several different reasons that could go into this, right? They say here in some of their discussion, the benefits of marriage on all of the outcomes evaluated in this study have additional potential underlying etiologies. Psychologically, the diagnosis of cancer may result in more distress than other diagnoses. Patients who are married display less distress, depression, and anxiety than their unmarried counterparts after a diagnosis of cancer, as a partner can share the emotional burden and provide appropriate social support, right? And they go on to describe that. They describe other things, about how your spouse can help you make it to your appointments on time and help you keep track of everything that's going on. So there's a lot of logistical things, a lot of emotional burden bearing. There's a lot of reasons why marriage might have an impact, but it's just that impact of relationships. And what they're saying here is, as an outcome of this study, they're saying there should be social support, for people who aren't married, so that they can have some of those benefits and have people who are around them and helping them as well, because we're not meant to live life alone. And this is really such a Christian value, just to value other people, right? To carry one another's burdens, to be there for each other. This is a matter of life and death. You're literally helping people to live longer just by developing good relationships. And this really starts in our home. And just like this study specifically about our marriage, right? This starts with our marriage, of having strong marriage, of being faithful and committed to one another. One other data point that I thought was interesting was at the beginning, they talk about just some demographics. All right, so this table is just demographic information about who's in the study. So I thought it was interesting, the age. The mean age was 66 in the unmarried group and 63 in the married, which really isn't that far off, right? They're both, in their 60s. A standard deviation for the first group was 14 years. So that means more than 60% of the data was within plus or minus 14 of 66. And then for the other group was within plus or minus 12 of 63. So, right, a good chunk of the data is in that age range, right? So for you to be, right, married at that age, generally people aren't getting married for the first time in their 60s, right? So for, I'd say, a good portion of these people, they've been faithfully, with their spouse for many, many years. They've just strengthened that relationship, and they've been together with one another. And I think that just shows us the value of faithfulness, of sticking with it through the hard times, so that when you are older and when you're going through these things, you have support and you have someone who's with you, who to go through these things. So again, I thought this was a really interesting study. This just scientifically highlights the value and the meaning of relationships, in particular the relationships within your own household. And it just reminds us of the importance of bearing one another's burdens, of being there for each other, being faithful, going to appointments together, helping each other with just the things that you're going through in life and the benefits that it carries. Thanks for joining us for today's segment. I hope you're encouraged and that you're able to go out and just love on the people who are in your community, your friends, your family, those who are around you, and just really value those relationships and see how important and meaningful those are. As always, I look forward to hearing your response, what you think, and if anything from today's episode surprised you. And remember to live in truth.